Hi, welcome to our latest edition of Leadership in Lockdown, and really delighted to say today we have a panel edition rather than our kind of one-to-one interviews that we've done so far. So we decided this time to work in partnership with AGCAS to try and create a wider kind of set of perspectives from various leaders of careers and employability teams across the AGCAS membership to give a kind of wide range of perspectives and broaden out some of the thinking about leadership, about the challenges for careers and employability as we kind of look now in the current situation, but also kind of as we stare ahead and think, well, what's this all going to look like in the future? So the idea of these sessions generally is just to share some ideas, some insights, hopefully some inspiration for those of you watching and listening to kind of feed into some of your work and some of the things the challenges you're facing at the moment, but also just to get a take from other people about how they're currently approaching some of these things, and also just get some opinions about maybe how careers and employability services might kind of be shaped and reshaped by this kind of current situation. So really delighted with our panel today. We've got a fantastic range of people to hear from all sorts of places around the UK, and also different types of institutions, sort of size and shape of institutions. So hoping for a great range of perspectives as well. So I'm just going to start with some introductions, if that's okay. So go around kind of one at a time, and our panel are going to kind of introduce themselves and their institutions. So Shona, can I start with you?
Sure. Hi there, I'm Shona Johnston. I'm Assistant Director in Student Services at the University of Dundee, with responsibility for employability, enterprise and commercialisation. And I'm also the convener of AGCAS in Scotland. Fantastic,
thanks. Adele?
I'm Adele Brown. I'm Head of Careers and Employability at De Montfort University. So I look after all employer engagement, placements, uni temps and careers advice and guidance. De Montfort has about 24,000 students, and about 75% of our student population are from so-called widening participation backgrounds.
Great, thank you. John, over to you.
Hi, I'm Director of Careers at Royal Holloway, part of the Careers Group, University of London, Vice President of AGCAS, and I'm also HEFCU's representative on their Student Achievement Committee for Employability.
Great, thanks. And Elaine?
Hi, I'm Elaine Boys. I'm the Executive Director of AGCAS.
Thanks. And then finally, Jo.
Hi, I'm Jo Beaumont from the University of Bradford. Like Montfort, we're a university that's particularly got a strong emphasis around WP.
Fantastic. Thank you all for joining us and for giving your time for this. Really appreciate it. And it's going to be great to hear from you on some of these topics. So let's start with a pretty broad brush question, but what have the kind of leadership challenges and maybe opportunities been during this situation? Jo, and we're kind of reverse order from earlier. Can I start with you on that?
Well, I think initially, as you know, just getting used to the fluidity of the environment, the changing environment, and very quickly getting into a home working approach. And I think for our service, because we've got a number of online services already running as part of our normal setup, particularly our one-to-one and webinars, that transition perhaps in terms of service delivery wasn't as such a transformational change as perhaps for other parts of the university. But I think in terms of individuals in the team adapting to home working and flexible working in terms of dealing with other aspects of their life was one of the early challenges. And I think this issue about digital inequality, there's been a lot I think coming through about that from a student perspective and graduate perspective in terms of engaging with services. But I think that's been certainly something that we've been working through at Bradford in terms of trying to enable staff really to engage with one another, with the service, with the development, but feeling that they've got great access to that really. And I suppose that links to some of the well-being, which I think that's kind of coming through very much with us as university, as students and staff, but also it's been interesting some of the conversations with employers and how they're managing that kind of staff engagement in the technology side, and real opportunities to engage people and strong communication. So I think there's some of the initial challenges. Some of those are kind of worked through now and we're bedded in, but I still think, you know, as a theme for us in the sector, this thing about digital equality is going to be something that's going to be with us for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, is that something other people have found? This kind of, I know certainly we've been running a lot of virtual assessment centres, and actually one of the big additional almost forms of bias we've had to factor for is that digital inequality. You know, what is a level playing field from a tech perspective? But anyway, what have other people found on that?
It's been a very similar position for us in terms of that digital disadvantage. But there was an opportunity in how assessments moved online to really look at the holistic approach to supporting student access to digital. So some of the problems we identified in the service were solved by cooperation, working with academic colleagues. IT has been a challenge for us, and whilst some of the things we've overcome, I think the biggest problem for my team and in leading the team has been trying to find meeting free time. There is so much that is now happening online. You know, in a physical environment, sometimes it was difficult to make space between meetings, but almost the way we're working at the moment encourages back-to-back meetings and availability. So that is an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, I think certainly we're finding that kind of back-to-back video thing is certainly a pretty regular situation. Any other sort of any other opportunities that have emerged though in I guess some of the challenges of this for people?
So I think for me it's like Joe said, the team has been pretty online and is you know, in some ways already had been involved in you know, various live streams and a lot of webinar work and so on anyway, to kind of diversify our offer while we were still on campus. But I think one of the real opportunities now is actually to accelerate the thinking of the team in being agile, because I would call them a pretty agile team, but there is no doubt about it, you know, that needs to be accelerated and even more, you know, integral now to how they work. So they are a creative bunch and they've been, you know, thinking of all kinds of different ways to engage students online, but I also need them to think about their roles and you know, say for example 1-year placements. Yes, there will be some 1-year placements, but we need to think about different ways to meet business needs, flexible, shorter opportunities that also give students chance to gain work experience, that mean we can't just have teams of a certain number of people that just do 1-year placements. Do you think so? That kind of merging and fluidity of what they do is something that, in thinking of the kind of medium to long term, that's been a real focus of my thinking, and how can we prepare for that while we are all working virtually. So I see that as a great opportunity. I see it as making universities more agile and responsive than perhaps we have been.
I think alongside that is, as you say, there's that kind of innovation, that creativity, that, you know, that agile kind of way of thinking about how we move forward as a service. But I think one of the opportunities also for services is really expanding some of that consultancy role across the university and outside of the university walls into the local area. I certainly think, you know, Adele was just mentioning about placements. We've got a new placement forum, which is really trying to tease out new models within the curriculum, but also extracurricular. And that engagement with academics, there's a real kind of appetite and I think an excitement around that in terms of moving swiftly and really kind of having those creative conversations. It's not to say they weren't happening before, but there's an acceleration of that. I think that's really energizing for the team and a kind of recognition of their abilities within this arena.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess just building on some of the things you've then said there between you about agility and I guess new opportunities and the need to kind of accelerate development and things. What and if a couple of you have talked there about, you know, obviously shifting things online and things which kind of I guess everyone's had to do. But Shona, I don't know if I can come to you on this, but I guess how have your team or teams sort of started kind of shifting in terms of either new technology or kind of new models of working as well as just kind of, you know, turning what you did already online, which you may well have been doing some of already?
Yeah, I think it's something that's often not recognised about 21st century career services, is that we are and have been doing this for quite a while, and in many ways are pioneering within our institution. So with, you know, that because of the way our services are currently set up, because we offer online teaching events, remote guidance to graduates, for example, and we have done for many, many years, it was actually, as others have said, very easy to switch to online. We had it organised by lunchtime on the day we were told that face-to-face was finishing. So I think that probably maybe quells some of those myths around the sort of old-fashioned individuals in cardigans waiting for people to come to them that we still all hear now and again. But I think in my service we have sort of particular challenges and opportunities because we offer fully credit-bearing provision in the curriculum. And luckily we did a very large review of that last year and developed some really fantastic new video resources and piloted our university's virtual learning environment as a new version. So we are feeling really very smug about that right now, and we're actually in the position where my team are being able to offer mentorship and you know, ideas and all that learning to other teams. So that's kind of serendipitous, and I think kind of planned, and as I say, kind of indicative of the fact that career services have been thinking about commuter students and graduates and not traditional face-to-face students for quite some time. I think though the temptation then is to assume everyone's equally comfortable with it, and that goes for students as well as staff. You know, it's not just digital access, it's the fact that not all our students are the digital natives that people tend to assume. So I think while being smug, we can't be too smug. You know, not all of our team are equally comfortable, depending on what their roles were, and not all of our students are equally comfortable with tech. And you know, that's something that we have to be very aware of and make sure that we are not making assumptions.
Yeah, is that, and I guess generally for other people, was that switch over fairly straightforward? And I guess building on that, what's the kind of, you know, the next twist in that, I suppose, in terms of, yes, a lot of that online stuff was going on already. What's the kind of next evolution that builds on top of that says, actually, we've got class of 2020 who are facing a really difficult labour market. What can we build on top of kind of, you know, having shifted online?
I mean, I think one of the things that we're exploring is in Bradford is, as colleagues have said, we're using quite a number of difficult digital platforms, but I think it's about trying to really tease out which platforms really are most appropriate for certain delivery, for certain audiences, etc. Because, you know, whether it's be live Instagram or Facebook or as, you know, internal VLE kind of environments. So I think that's one of the things really, talking to some colleagues at another service yesterday about their use of YouTube. So I think it's going to be about which resource for which kind of delivery for which audience, and how you manage that as a resource yourself back in your service, because that's quite intensive in terms of creating new content. But I think within that content development, for us, we're exploring how we can bring employers particularly in as co-producers of that more, or even leading that and handing that over a bit more. So we're facilitating the bringing it together, but the actual content and deliveries is much more led by employers, but also that kind of peer-to-peer delivery, and students speaking to one another, graduates speaking to one another, that kind of story sharing, etc. Because I think that's going to be the whole thing about in future, looking at the narrative that's out there about the labour market, and it will be different whether that's local, regional or national, and how do we understand that narrative and share that, because it you know, it will be very nuanced, I think.
I think there's still something important that we'll need to continue doing around preparing students for how they engage online. So a colleague of mine was talking to me this morning about that kind of etiquette of if you're going to sign up for an employer's webinar, what's the etiquette around joining and then leaving five minutes later? You know, this kind of awareness that we need to build students, which we already would have for certain fixed activities that were online, but now that broadly they would be engaging online for all kinds of purposes, and the audiences of students are, and this is exciting, much expanded, because I think in some ways that's going to make access more inclusive, you know, depending how it's run. But there's still that kind of, what are you know, how do you need to prepare for this? How do you want to present yourself? What are you going to take from it and articulate about it afterwards, depending on the type of opportunity? So yeah, lots of good things for students to learn.
And any other kind of, I guess, technology developments or things that you're looking at implementing or you have implemented that you think are starting to look particularly effective or kind of beneficial?
I think there was a drawback in the very early weeks of the pandemic. It felt like a tidal wave of offerings of IT solutions, that was difficult for my team. You know, actually the basics that we had worked really well. A bit like Shona's example, when we left the office, we carried on working seamlessly from our homes with the technology that we had. But it was almost felt that because of the deluge of what we were being offered, that we were missing something, and our students would be missing out if we weren't part of that conversation. So that was difficult. It felt sometimes a bit like Emperor's New Clothes. So actually being able to have a conversation as a team. But the upside of this way of working, I noticed the silos came down within the team. Last December, the college's volunteering team became part of the service. And in the early months of the year, it had been very much like still placements, employer engagement, volunteering. But actually, through the use of technology, the teams had reorganized themselves in a way that the right people were being part of those meetings and finding the synergy. So actually, they were identifying the solutions. And I'm not sure if that would have happened so quickly had it not been that we had a kind of a platform that leveled that connectivity.
Yeah.
I just been going to say something really quite similar. I absolutely agree with that. And I think, yes, we can replace a lot of what we would normally do or what we would normally facilitate with technology, but actually what's been valuable for us is not necessarily doing that. It's actually having a conversation about, why are we doing careers fairs or employer events this way? And actually, you know, is what we're hoping to achieve what we are achieving, and therefore do we want to try and reproduce them in a digital manner, or do we actually want to take a step back and say, well, has our focus shifted, and this is a chance to reimagine that? So yeah, similarly to John, you know, there was a real temptation at the beginning to say the solution is buy more technology and quickly, but actually it's been more valuable when we've taken a bit of time to say, actually, let's stop and think first, and go back to the drawing board really on why we're doing these things.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, isn't it? Like getting back to purpose. And, you know, we've picked that up a lot, that there was bombarding of people with, new tech offers, but hopefully, you know, often probably unproven ones. And also that kind of, like you said, there's that kind of job of filtering those, isn't there? But also thinking, what actually do you really need to do here, and what's important? And it reminds me a bit of talking as well to people I know who run small businesses who through this crisis are kind of getting leaner and meaner because they have to kind of strip back to core principles and go, okay, well, what was the kind of nice fat that we had that kind of, you know, while things were great, but actually now it's a much tighter situation. We can just focus in on the stuff that really makes a difference. It moves to a slightly different kind of topic. So just thinking a bit more about leadership in a kind of wider context. And Elaine, I don't know if I can start with you with this one, but you know, just thinking about examples of leadership you might have seen either in and around you, in your teams, in universities, or in public life that you either admire or maybe don't admire actually as well equally. But, you know, what are you seeing about kind of leadership that's kind of emerging in this time?
I think it's for me it's been really interesting because as everybody has spoken about, the career services moved online very rapidly. They were surprisingly, I think in most cases, very ready for it. They were already offering blended learning. But I think for me the really great leadership I've seen within the sector has been the sharing of leadership that's been really generously shared and people have the sort of the competition that we don't have a huge amount of in the AGCAS community anyway, but that competition has disappeared and everybody's talking about how we collaborate. I try not to mention anyone's service above the other because they're all very great, but our colleagues at Open University obviously are leaders in delivering online, and they have been incredibly generous about sharing their knowledge with the wider community through the AGCAS channel. So I think across the board there's been some great collaboration, but I think as a sector as well, there's been a lot of cross-sector collaboration that's been showing great leadership, because it's a time when as universities and the university sector, it's needed. So there's been some great initiatives, some great organisational collaborations going on, which has been interesting to watch and be part of. The AGCAS and the AGCAS community, we've never been busier, I don't think.
Any other thoughts on kind of leadership you've seen and things around you or in life generally?
So just a couple of thoughts really. So firstly, if we're going to talk leaders, I have to mention Jacinda Ardern, because she's my new role model following Michelle Obama. She's taken over. But I think what you see there is, it's just that leadership is empathy, isn't it? Availability, clarity, so many things to admire, and, forgetting all of the, just in terms of presence and how somebody can relate to people, during a time of crisis. But I was also going to talk about decision making, speed of decision making. That's been really interesting to me. So looking at my own institution, there's been two different things going on really. On one hand, we needed to form, senior decision making committees because of the urgency of the situation and because everything was new. So there was, in some ways, some waiting for decisions to be made because everything needed to be considered at top level. And that was important because, we were dealing with a very unknown situation. But on the other hand, as the head of careers, because there was a loosening of rules around various things like there have been in many parts of society to keep things moving, it's been possible to push through new schemes quicker than I would have. So one of the things which was particularly satisfying was that we wanted to start, we kind of woke up with an idea of, let's see if we could get our tech students to support small businesses locally who haven't got their product range online, don't have a website, etc., etc. And within 2 days, we had it up on the LEP website.
Amazing.
That wouldn't have happened. And it partly would have been because we wouldn't have had that internal urgency to go, let's do it now, because this is when they need the help. But also because I wouldn't say the university was distracted, but there was just not time to go through all of the normal, very slow due diligence and all the paperwork. So we actually stripped it out and produced something lean overnight. That was satisfactory, and that meant that we helped 30 businesses and 30 students, had a brilliant experience. So that shows how it just can be done in times of urgency, I suppose. So it's, really good learning.
That's really important. It's that kind of, done is better than perfect, isn't it? And that kind of sense of, and I was talking to Nalini on one of the Nalini Thambar from Nottingham on one of the previous editions of this, and she was talking about a similar kind of, mindset of, actually not necessarily waiting for all of those boxes to be ticked, but what's good enough to really make something move forward.
Yes. And sorry, I was just going to add, and just taking a risk. We took a risk, and we said to the businesses and the students, look, this might not work. Let's just try it. If it's not working, we stop. And we may not have done that under normal circumstances.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand sort of has been a phenomenal role model, hasn't she, in terms of leadership and over multiple crises now, to be honest, but obviously most recently this one. Okay, so we've already talked a bit about how there's had to be sort of certain immediate change and things, but I guess how do you see maybe, and you've talked about some of the shifts in terms of more and more time spent almost because a lot of careers and employability services have already been pretty well developed on things like, digital delivery and all that kind of stuff. You're almost acting as consultants into your faculties in some cases and things like that. How do you think careers and employability services will be changed for the long term by this? Will they be, or will actually, when maybe the dust settles on the COVID situation and we go back to whatever normal is, will we revert or will certain things stick? So I don't know, John, I don't know if you wanted to kind of kick us off on that.
It was 14th of February this year. I was on a panel roundtable discussion, and I was asked what was the shelf life of the careers service in the UK. And I said, I think it was about artificial intelligence, and I said, I think we've got 10 years left. And it actually feels like when lockdown happened, it felt like we had 10 months left to get it changed. And now 10 weeks into it, I think it has changed forever. I've been at the institution I'm at now since September. And if I think back to what it was like in September, meeting new colleagues and talking about the curriculum, talking about delivery, consultancy, and it was almost like, yes, we'll get around to doing that, but it's not a priority. It's not broken, so we don't need to fix it. So with various institutional barriers, those have absolutely evaporated in terms of that collegiate approach to finding solutions. And I think the reason it's changed so much is that we recognize the bandwidth, or the limited bandwidth students are going to have this autumn term to take on information. We'll be operating a flexible approach to delivery. So whether students are on campus, whether they're commuting, whether they're living from at home, they're trying to make sure they've all got that same experience. So providing the information as part of their program delivery, there's a much more holistic approach to careers delivery. And I think what's interesting for me at the AGCAS Heads Conference, I can remember we've talked about it a number of times, that careers and employability is a whole institution approach. It's not just down to the careers service, but actually trying to make that tangible. And I actually feel that if, there is a silver lining to the crisis we're living through, is that it now feels like it is tangible. It does feel like the whole institution is completely behind the progression of our students. So for me, yeah, definitely changed forever.
Shona, what's your thoughts on that? Is that your sense as well? Or?
Yeah, I think in our institution, we have had that strong link into the curriculum and with the wider institution. Excuse me, and we've been lucky to have that. Our challenges have probably historically been different. For example, the Scottish degree in many non-vocational disciplines doesn't lend itself so easily to embedded work experience. Being in smaller labour markets for many of our universities that aren't in big cities. So probably our big challenges are around work experience in particular. And again, as I mentioned, I think what this offers us is a chance to rethink that. What do we mean by work experience, work-related experience? What are we actually trying to achieve here? And does this give us alternative ways to help our students build their confidence, articulate their skills, develop their networks, which is really the reasons behind us having a role in organising work experience. So while we have the confusion really and some concern in the team just now about things like the placements in schools that we organise every year for students who want to become teachers, and how we're going to continue that. We also have the opportunity to think, well, could we deliver a different kind of experience for many more students if we weren't constrained by physical location? And I think that's a necessary development in getting us from it's like the sort of familiar career service problem of doing very good things for a minority of students. So if we can get this right, it really helps with that democratization of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think placement, certainly from the conversations we're having around the place, that kind of, the ISE data is showing that internships and placements are harder hit than graduate hiring at the moment. And so there's going to be a really acute challenge around that. And but also, like you say, it creates an opportunity, doesn't it, to rethink what does placement and work experience look like? If you deconstruct it, what are the component parts? Is that a shared view of everyone? Or?
Definitely, and I was just going to bring in also the the regional aspect of this. So already, I think a lot of us are probably working more if we weren't already in our regions, and lots of things are going to increase the focus on that. So, for example, if students aren't necessarily travelling away to other universities that they might have gone to before, and more people are staying local than even were. And the cities and the regions around us just offer up opportunities for students to gain work experience, but also for those cities and regions to gain from students. So some of the work that we have been doing over the past year has just shown so clearly how much students want to contribute their ideas, and the kind of innovation that can bring to all kinds of aspects of city life. And I'm not fighting a battle, but I'm kind of championing in every conversation I have at the university, let's involve students in this. So if we're talking about the university supporting the city for its recovery and its emergence from COVID, well, students need to be part of every project that we're doing in this area, and that will make it better. So, and this at the same time will bring that real world experience that they're seeking. So there's so much partnership that can happen, which I think will be accelerated.
Yeah. Joe, sorry.
Yeah, I just echo the things that both Shona and Adele are talking about in terms of a real opportunity to think about outside the box and move beyond the established models to do with work-related learning and placement experience, etc. And I think that, as Adele's saying, the link into place and locality even stronger. And I think one of the themes we've been exploring this year alongside that, in terms of students and students into local business, into local voluntary and community, but actually is about mobilising the community and community perceptions of career and aspirations and life beyond university, and the kind of fabulous role models that are there within different parts of our communities, and how we kind of shine a light on those in terms of really giving a true sense of the kind of life paths that our alumni and are happening in our locality, because I think they can be, careers are crazy paving. And I think trying to kind of bring that narrative forward, I think particularly as we move forward, as you say, a lot of the structures maybe about work are going to be really different as we move forward, as companies find their own new norm, and it's how we can contribute, and our student and graduate talent really make a difference within our local areas as well as some of those national pictures. So I think it's that relationship between the university community in terms of the broad community, but the individual communities that are surrounding us, as well as then that whole different narrative that will start to emerge with businesses as they start to establish their new norms and understand their new skill sets that we're looking for.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that kind of refreshing of making sure there's kind of a local, regional, national kind of split of activity and kind of smart thinking about how that's targeted and focused. In terms of asking government as well to say, well, there's some of these things you need to get behind as well, in terms of the genuine challenge in the labour market that's faced in the next few months, maybe over the next sort of even longer than that. But I think they're exactly the areas where, with that kind of mix of sort of social kind of civic input from universities, that could be massively positive outcomes out of this. So just starting to sort of draw things to a close, and I guess I wanted to ask you all kind of each just comment on perhaps your own sort of, we've all, one of the big things about this whole period of time has been the kind of the change in kind of work-life dynamic as well, with us all working at home and all of that kind of thing, and brings a kind of new slant to leadership and how you motivate and maintain strong teams and cultures in that kind of environment. Just be great to get a reflection on each of you and what you think you've kind of personally either taken or learned or developed or changed around leadership in this kind of time, because I think it's hard not to have changed as a leader in this kind of environment. So Elaine, can I start with you on this one?
Yeah, it's different. You're right, it is different from what we had before. AGCAS as a staff team, though it's quite a small staff team, we've always had a pattern of some home working. But I think for me, what's been quite interesting is we're now much more aware of people as the whole person. I think we don't just see them in the office environment, we see their children running past, their cats, their various elements. So it's been very much about, for me, it's about we're working as much more aware of people as whole people, much more, I think, accepting that we're making decisions without having all of the knowledge. So where we might have waited, as people have touched on before, waited to get all of the information before we make a decision, we have to make the decision and just go with it and hope we got it right. And I think there's a lot more risk taking being able to be done because of that. But actually, for AGCAS as a whole and the nearly 4,000 individuals that make up AGCAS, I think we're more connected now because those members that I don't get to see because of geography are now much more engaged with what we were able to do because there's an equality to the membership that we've not had before. So I'm actually seeing more of my members than I ever did, which is quite nice. And they're coming to me in the comfort of my own home, so there's a lot less commuting. So it's not all bad, is I think would be what I would say.
No. Adele, do you want to? What have you learned about leadership in this?
So the thing I've been reflecting on most in terms of being a leader in this situation is actually I think I think I'm working almost stronger in this situation of working from home, and I'm trying to think. I've been thinking a lot about why that is, and it's about interactions with people, and it's about all of those interactions in your day to day that actually might throw you off, throw you off the main thing you're supposed to be focusing on. I mean, it's not all work and no play, but if you think of those hundreds of faces that you see every day going into work and out of work, and that general draining effect that can have on you, and the ability to focus because you're working on with your own team and the immediate people that you need to work with, I think that's just driving a lot of real focus and creativity in the team. But having said that, in terms of supporting the team, I'd noticed myself that you need to have kind of little landing points, at least during the week, where you're going to have touch points, or you recognise that if I see those people, that's going to buoy me up, or that, and so I've tried to, as a leader, make sure that those little anchors are in there for them. So we have like a little kind of catch up on a Monday afternoon for one group and on a Tuesday for another group, because people have all kinds of things going on in their lives, as Elaine's just mentioned, and they're coping with all kinds of different situations, and it's very stressful for some people. So just to have that coming together and that support is important in an informal way, no agenda, nothing. Let's just get together and see how everyone's doing. Yeah.
No, absolutely. John, what about you on that?
Similar to what Elaine and Adele have said, for me, it's the power of that question, how are you? Which I think in the office we would sometimes, or around campus, you'd say, how are you? And yet we'll just say fine. And it was almost like a kind of given, and you'd then just launch into the work conversation. But actually the power of asking someone how they are and listening can give some really early warning signs in terms of what's required. And also it's a two-way thing. I've been asked more by my team how I am. So it's kind of more leveled the playing field sometimes during the meetings. The second thing is, and it's the only aspect of this role I struggle with. I've been a solicitor, I've taught law. I've never worked in an environment like professional services that has so many rules as to what you can and can't do in terms of start time, lunch hours. And the one thing I've empowered my team is that actually less of the rules are necessary. Let's find the solutions. And it has been liberating, going back to the point that I see my team juggling home life, juggling children, caring responsibilities, and actually let's find the solutions. You know what your day is like, you know what your commitments are. It's not really working from home, it's being at home in unusual circumstances and trying to work. So I've noticed that actually my team have taken more responsibility by freeing them up of some of the constraints of the rules that I think sometimes university structures impose. Yeah,
that's really, really powerful idea. And I think, I often think kind of an excess of rules is usually an indicator of a pretty poor culture. Like it's inevitable in a lot of universities because of the size and the scale, but still, like you say, there's a freedom, isn't there, in taking some of those where you can.
It's a freedom, and actually the delivering is more powerful. The delivery is absolutely more powerful and rewarding for them. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah. Joe, what about you?
Just echo colleagues, really. I think that that whole focus around kind of outcomes and solutions and kind of process, people are quite capable of taking process themselves and being innovative around that. But I think that links back to this thing about flexibility. And I think it was Adela was saying, really getting a stronger sense of people as the whole person, the holistic kind of life that they're leading, and where work is fitting in for them at that point. I don't mean, you know, it's important for them, but it's part of their life, I suppose. And I suppose it's understanding some more of that mood music around for both our staff and for our students, and thinking about, well, how does that shape what we need to be in terms of our offer at this point. So, and I think, you know, similarly, we've built kind of formal, but quite a number of informal touch points in. You know, the equivalent of making the coffee in the kitchen or being around the photocopier, just for people to kind of connect in that more informal way. A buddying kind of process that we've got across in the team. And actually, one of the things that I know some people have taken up in the team, and myself including, is a buddying that was broader across AGCAS members. So using it as a way to connect and bring ideas and thoughts back into the team, just in that kind of formal buddying way. So I think, yeah, I think it's about tuning in more to the breadth of people, perhaps. Actually, what you're bringing in is people of a very energised, I'm finding, around that, and it's very focused. Something about talking to people on this little screen, clarity in that conversation, I think.
Agree. Shona, finally, last but not least, what have your learnings, and I guess on leadership and maybe more generally, been from all of this?
Yeah, I think probably my experience has been a little bit different, but not less valuable in terms of learning. Usually, my leadership style is probably having quite high standards, and you know, kind of problem solving and taking on a lot of challenges, which is probably the hallmark of a small service. But and yeah, that does also mean I can be quite task focused. But in this situation with small children at home, I'm probably being closer to the experience of that some of my team are having, that it is a struggle. Yeah, I am, for the first time, I think, ever in my career, having to say, no, I can't do that, and not being able to find a way around it, to having real ups and downs and having to share that with colleagues, and to saying, I don't know what we're going to do about this, or we might just not be able to do that. And that's difficult. But it's probably not a bad thing either. You know, we've already talked about the types of leaders, you know, where people have recognized that the empathy and that ability to say, I don't have all the answers, but we're working through it together, has actually been more important. So I think that's been useful, although not always easy learning, and hopefully something I can carry forward. But I think it is really important, particularly for leaders, because I think that's not the reality of many of the leadership community in universities. That they are really, you know, struggling day to day with the child care or the caring, or the mental health, or any of the ups and downs that a lot of staff are facing. And I think as we see this stretching out for more and more months, it's really important that leaders, in all the ways that my colleagues here have described, are remembering to check the mood music and to ask, are you okay, and are you sure? Because I think there's probably more people struggling, and not wanting to admit it. And I think the more that we acknowledge that, and in ourselves or in our teams, is really important.
Yeah, no, profoundly important, I think, and I think something that yeah, I've noticed a lot, both in conversations with people in our team, but also with our clients and people we work with. You know, just perhaps a greater sharing. You know, that you know, the comment earlier about, you know, that John, you said about that as well, about that first part of the conversation, the how are you becoming actually a much more meaningful conversation. And that actually I think that's enriched things, actually, to me. I think that's you know, we maybe were ignoring that in our fast lives before, whizzing around everywhere, and actually that's maybe there's an unexpected benefit in some of that. And I know, again, from the conversation with Nalini the other week, unexpected benefits are actually quite a powerful thing sort of emerging from some of this, as well as all the tough stuff. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, all of you. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts. Thank you to those of you watching and listening for joining us for this latest edition. If you'd like to have a look at any of the previous interviews, they're on the Gradcore website or on my Twitter and LinkedIn profiles, and hope you find that useful with the kind of insights and ideas. Thanks again hugely to the panel today. Stay safe wherever you are, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.